I'm Deborah, 28, female. I live in a small but comfortable apartment that I worked incredibly hard for, balancing my demanding job as a social worker with years of frugal living. My life has always been about responsibility, about caring for others, which is probably what led me to where I am now, about to tell you how I paid for a six-figure wedding only to be labeled as the help. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. My family dynamic has always been skewed. My mother, Karen, viewed my younger sister, Chloe, as her second chance at a life she never had. Chloe was the beautiful one, the charismatic one, the one destined for a life of ease and glamour. I was the responsible one, the smart one, the one who was expected to be sensible. From a young age, that meant my achievements were benchmarks for Chloe to either meet or ignore, while my savings were treated as a family emergency fund. When our father left, the dynamic only intensified. I was 18, just starting college on a scholarship. I took a second job, then a third, sending money home to ensure Chloe never had to go without the dance lessons, the brand, name clothes, or the school trips that I had quietly forfeited years before. My role was set in stone. I was the provider, the safety net, the ever-reliable, invisible support system. When I was 25, my estranged grandfather passed away. He was a man I barely knew, but he'd apparently followed my academic and early career success from afar. He left his entire estate to me. It wasn't billions, but it was enough to change my life. A paid-off house, a solid investment portfolio, and a significant cash inheritance. My first instinct was relief. I could finally breathe. I could travel, maybe go back to school for my master's without drowning in debt. My mother and Chloe had a different idea to them. My inheritance wasn't mine. It was a family windfall they were entitled to manage. The request started small, a new car for Mom because hers was unreliable, a designer wardrobe for Chloe to help her network, for her aspiring influencer career. I agreed, telling myself it was easier than fighting, that it would make them happy. It was a foolish thought. Giving them an inch only made them want a mile. Then came Liam. Chloe met him a year ago, and he fit into the family picture perfectly. He was handsome, charming, and saw the dollar signs in Chloe's eyes. He complimented my mother's taste, praised Chloe's non-existent career, and treated me with a cloying sweetness that felt entirely fake. He was unemployed, floating between projects, but he had expensive taste, which Chloe was more than happy to adopt. 6 months into their whirlwind romance, they announced their engagement. I was happy for my sister, truly, but my happiness was quickly overshadowed by a sense of dread. The day after the engagement party, the three of them sat me down in my own living room for what they called a family meeting. "Deborah," my mother began, her voice dripping with artificial sincerity, "we know you want the best for your sister. And Chloe has a very specific vision for her perfect day." Chloe took over, her eyes wide with feigned innocence. "It's just that, with Liam's family being so prominent, they weren't. We have an image to maintain. We can't just have a small, tacky wedding." She slid a binder across the coffee table. It was filled with pictures torn from bridal magazines, ballrooms dripping with crystals, dresses that cost more than my car, floral arrangements that could feed a small village. The budget, neatly itemized on the final page, came to just over $100,000. I stared at the number, my heart pounding. It was an obscene amount of money, this is. "A lot," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Chloe, this is more than the down payment on a house." Liam, who had been silent until now, placed a hand on Chloe's shoulder. "We know it's a big ask, Deb, but think of it as an investment in Chloe's future. A wedding like this will launch her brand, the photos, the guests. It's a networking event." I looked at my mother, hoping for a voice of reason. She just nodded in agreement. "She's right, honey. This is her one big day. You were always so good at saving." "It's what you do." The implication was clear. My role was to earn and save, hers was to spend. Any protest I made was met with tears from Chloe, accusations of jealousy from my mother, and disappointed sighs from Liam. They called me selfish, unsupportive, and bitter. They wore me down until, in a moment of sheer emotional exhaustion, I caved. "Fine," I said, the word tasting like ash. "I'll cover it." Their faces lit up in triumphant smiles. I wasn't a sister or a daughter. I was a bank, and the vault was officially open. For the next year, my life became a cascade of invoices and consultations, I was added to email chains with planners, florists, and caterers. Every decision was the most expensive option. When I questioned a $5,000 ice sculpture, Chloe accused me of trying to ruin her day. When I suggested a more affordable venue, my mother said I had no taste. I wasn't consulted, I was just sent the bills. I transferred lump sums from my inheritance into a joint account I'd set up for them, watching my hard won security dwindle with every champagne tasting and dress fitting. The day of the wedding arrived under a flawless blue sky, the kind of perfect day Chloe had probably demanded from the universe. The venue was a sprawling country estate, every inch of it screaming expense. Manicured lawns, a rose garden in full bloom, and a grand ballroom with floor-to-ceiling windows. As I pulled up, I handed the keys to the valet, a service that cost an extra $1,000, and took a deep breath. I was the Maid of Honor, a title that felt more like a job description than a term of endearment. My duties had included everything from calming a hysterical Chloe when the wrong shade of ivory napkins arrived to personally driving across 3 towns to find the specific brand of Belgian chocolates Liam wanted for the guest favors. My dress, a blush pink monstrosity Chloe had picked out, felt tight and scratchy. "It brings out the color in your cheeks," she'd said, which I now realized was just a polite way of saying it washed me out completely. Still, I plastered on a smile. For the next 8 hours, my only job was to ensure Chloe's perfect day went off without a hitch. I survived the ceremony, a half hour of flowery vows and fake tears from Liam. I fixed Chloe's train a dozen times, held her bouquet, and even dabbed her forehead with tissue so her ridiculously expensive makeup wouldn't run. I was a sister on autopilot, pushing down the resentment that had been simmering for a year. I told myself that once this day was over, I could finally step back, set boundaries, and reclaim my life. The reception was held in the main ballroom. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over tables laden with towering floral centerpieces. A string quartet played softly in the corner. It was undeniably beautiful, a fairytale scene bought and paid for. Guests were finding their seats, their laughter echoing in the cavernous room. I scanned the seating chart, looking for my name. As Maid of Honor, I expected to be at the head table with the bride and groom. I finally found my name, and my stomach dropped. I wasn't at the head table. I wasn't even at the table with my mother. I was at table 9, tucked away in a corner near the kitchen, sandwiched between a distant grate, Aunt who was deaf as a post, and a couple of Liam's college friends who were already slurring their words. The placement was a slap in the face, a clear message that my role as financier did not grant me a place in the inner circle. It hurt, but I swallowed my pride. I wouldn't make a scene. This was Chloe's day. I made my way to the back of the room, weaving through guests who barely gave me a second glance. I found table 9 and located my seat, and that's when I saw it. Propped up against a wine glass was a small, elegant place card, written in the same flowing calligraphy as the invitations, but it didn't say Deborah. It didn't even say Maid of Honor. In neat looping letters, my name tag read, "The old lady who's paying for everything." I froze, my blood ran cold. I stared at the card, reading the words over and over, hoping my eyes were deceiving me. The old lady. I was 28, but in their eyes, my responsible, frugal nature made me ancient and dull, who's paying for everything. It wasn't a thank you, it wasn't a nod of gratitude, it was a label, a joke, it was my entire identity, my entire worth to them. Reduced to a single mocking phrase for all to see, I slowly sank into the chair, the sound of the string quartet fading into a dull roar in my ears. I felt hundreds of eyes on me, even though no one was looking. The humiliation was a physical weight, pressing down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. They hadn't just taken my money, they had taken my name, my dignity, and turned my generosity into the punchline of a cruel joke. In that moment, sitting in the shadows by the kitchen door, the dutiful sister, the responsible daughter, the blank check, finally died, and someone new began to take her place. For several long minutes, I couldn't move. I sat there, staring at the offensive piece of cardstock, my mind a whirlwind of hurt and rage. My first instinct was to stand up, scream, and flip the table. My second was to burst into tears. I did neither. With a trembling hand, I slipped the name card into my small clutch purse. Evidence. The thought came out of nowhere, sharp and clear. I needed to get out of that ballroom before I did something I'd either regret or not regret enough. Pushing my chair back, I stood up on shaky legs and mumbled an excuse to the grate. And about needing some air, I made a beeline for the exit, keeping my head down, avoiding eye contact with anyone. I half expected Chloe or my mother to stop me, to ask why the Maid of Honor was fleeing the reception, but they were too busy holding court at the head table, basking in the glow of a party they hadn't paid for. I found myself in a richly decorated hallway lined with antique furniture and oil paintings. I ducked into a small, unused sitting room, closing the heavy oak door behind me. The sudden silence was a relief. I leaned against the door, finally letting out the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. The mask of the happy, supportive sister crumbled, and a single hot tear traced a path down my cheek. What had I done to deserve this? I had sacrificed my own dreams, my own financial security to give them this day. I'd endured a year of their entitlement, their demands, their complete disregard for me as a person, and this was my reward, to be a joke, the old lady with the checkbook. My grief quickly hardened into a cold, sharp anger. This wasn't just a mean, spirited prank. It was cruel. It was a calculated display of their contempt for me. I'd be seated there. They knew I'd see it. They probably thought I'd just take it, that I'd sit there quietly and absorb the humiliation as I always did. The thought that they might have laughed about it, planned it together, made my stomach turn. As I stood there, stewing in my own rage, I heard footsteps approaching in the hallway, followed by familiar voices. It was them, Chloe, Liam, and my mother. Their laughter echoed from the other side of the door. I flattened myself against the wall, holding my breath, listening. Did you see her face? Chloe shrieked, her voice high with glee. I wish I'd had my phone out. She looked like she was going to cry. She's probably off in a corner somewhere, balancing her checkbook. Liam added, and my mother let out a cackle. Oh, leave her be, Karen said, though there was no kindness in her tone. She needs to learn to take a joke. It's not our fault she's so uptight. Honestly, being so sensible at 28, it's ancient. She's been an old lady since she was 12. Well, the old lady's money spends just fine, Chloe retorted. Did you see the diamond earrings Liam got me as a wedding gift? A little bonus from the floral budget overage. That was brilliant, babe, Liam said. She'll never even notice. She just signs the checks. As long as we keep her happy with a cheap title like Maid of Honor, we can get whatever we want. My mother chimed in, her voice low and conspiratorial. Just make sure you keep all the receipts I gave you, the ones from the spa day and my new living room furniture. We'll tell her it was for guest comfort preparations. She's a social worker. She's pathologically helpful. She won't question it. Every word was a dagger. This wasn't just disrespect. It was organized, deliberate fraud. They weren't just ungrateful. They were thieves, plotting and laughing about it behind my back. They had been systematically siphoning money from the wedding fund for their own selfish desires, creating fake expenses and padding budgets, all while I worked extra shifts to ensure I could replenish my savings. The hurt I'd felt just moments before was burned away by a white, hot fury. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness. They had mistaken my generosity for stupidity, and they had just made the biggest mistake of their lives. I heard their footsteps fade as they headed back to the party. I remained frozen for another minute, my mind racing. The plan to just leave, to cut them off, was no longer enough. They didn't deserve a quiet exit. They deserved to be exposed. They deserved to face the consequences of their actions. The wedding they were so proud of, the one built on my money and my humiliation, was about to become the stage for their downfall. And I was going to be the one to bring the curtain down. The fury that had ignited in that hallway didn't burn out. It focused into a laser beam of purpose. I took out my phone, my hands surprisingly steady. The background was a picture of me and Chloe from years ago, smiling before all this. I deleted it. I went straight to my banking app and opened the credit card account I had designated for wedding expenses. I had given Chloe a card on the account for vendor deposits, telling her to use it only for approved purchases and to send me every receipt. She had sent me a folder full of them, but I'd been too busy, too trusting, to scrutinize them. Now, I scrolled through the transaction history, and the scale of their deception became sickeningly clear. There were the charges I expected, the deposit for the venue, the payment to the caterer, the florist. But intertwined with them was a litany of their personal greed, a $3,000 charge at a luxury designer boutique, a $5,000 charge at a high-end electronics store, a series of cash advances from ATM, all just under the daily limit. There was a charge for a 5-star hotel in the city for 2 nights, dated a month ago, clearly a little pre-wedding getaway for Chloe and Liam. Then I saw it, a $15,000 charge to a travel agency, the honeymoon. I had explicitly told them I would contribute a set amount to their honeymoon as a separate wedding gift after the wedding was over. They had gone behind my back and booked the most extravagant package available, a 3-week tour of Southeast Asia in first-class everything, and charged it to the wedding account. My breath hitched. They had stolen from me, not just padded budgets, but outright, blatant theft. My mind raced back to the receipts my mother had mentioned, my new living room furniture. I scrolled further and found it, $7.00 charge to a designer furniture store. They had completely refurnished her house on my dime. Every transaction was a betrayal. Every dollar spent was a testament to their bottomless greed and their absolute certainty that I would never find out. They saw me as a fool, a walking ATM with no feelings or intelligence of my own. I screenshotted everything, every suspicious charge, every cash advance, every extravagant purchase that had nothing to do with a wedding. The evidence was damning. I needed a clear head, an expert opinion. I sent a text to my best friend, Ben. He was a forensic accountant, the most logical, level-headed person I knew. My text was simple: emergency, call me. He called less than 30 seconds later. Deb, what's wrong? You're at the wedding. Ben, I need your help. I said, my voice low and urgent. I quickly explained everything: the name card, the conversation I overheard, the charges on the credit card. I didn't cry. My voice was eerily calm, fueled by pure adrenaline. I emailed him the screenshots as we spoke. Holy. He muttered as he looked through them, Deb, this is grand larceny. This isn't just a family squabble. They've committed serious fraud. I know, I said. They padded every budget. The receipts they gave me must be fake. They probably are, he confirmed. It's easy enough to do. Get a real receipt for a small amount, scan it, and alter the numbers, or create invoices from fake companies. Given the amounts here, I'm guessing they did both. They've stolen at minimum $50,000 from you, probably more. $50,000. The number hung in the air. That was a year of my salary. It was money I had earmarked for a down payment on a future home for myself, a dream I had put on hold for them. What do I do, Ben? I asked, though I already knew the answer. I just needed to hear it from someone else. Legally, you go to the police, he said. You file a report and you sue them in civil court to get the money back. The evidence is all here. They won't have a leg to stand on. He paused. But personally, knowing you, I think you need to do something else first. They humiliated you publicly. Answering that with a quiet lawsuit doesn't feel right. They are in a room full of people, showing off a lifestyle you paid for. You have the stage, Deb. You're the maid of honor. You expected to give a speech. A slow, cold smile spread across my face. He was right. A quiet legal battle would give them time to spin the story, to paint me as the crazy, bitter sister, but a public reckoning. That was something they would never see coming. The speech, I said, the idea solidifying in my mind. It's supposed to be in about an hour. Then you have an hour to prepare, Ben said, his voice firm with support. I'll start looking into the legal side of things for you. I'll find a lawyer. You just focus on what you need to do right now. And Deb, don't hold back. They don't deserve it. We hung up. I stood up, the last of my hesitation gone. I was no longer a victim in a back room. I was the arbiter of their consequences. They wanted a show. I was about to give them the performance of a lifetime. I walked out of the sitting room with a newfound sense of purpose. The anger was still there, but it was no longer a chaotic storm. It was a cold, hard, well-honed tool. I had a mission. I needed a quiet place to think, to craft the words that would dismantle their carefully constructed fantasy world. I bypassed the ballroom and slipped out a side door into the gardens. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the perfectly manicured hedges. I found a stone bench tucked away in a secluded corner of the rose garden, the scent of blossoms heavy in the air. It was a beautiful, peaceful spot, a stark contrast to the ugliness of my family's betrayal. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. I had a speech prepared, of course, a bland, generic tribute to my beautiful sister and her wonderful new husband. Filled with sanitized childhood memories and, well, wishes for their future. I read through it once, the saccharine words making me nauseous. Delete. I stared at the blank screen. Where to even begin? I thought about the name card, still tucked safely in my purse. The old lady who's paying for everything. That would be my opening. No more hiding, no more pretending. I would own their insult and turn it back on them like a mirror. I began to type, the words flowing out of me with a startling clarity. I wouldn't be hysterical or emotional. I would be calm, factual, and utterly devastating. I would lay out their deceit piece by piece, using their own words and actions against them. My social work training kicked in. I was an expert at documenting facts, at presenting a case clearly and concisely. This was just a different kind of case report. The structure of the speech formed quickly in my mind. Part 1, the introduction. I would start sweetly, lulling them into a false sense of security. I would talk about the honor of being maid of honor and the joy of seeing my sister so happy. Part 2, the reveal. I would hold up the name card. I would read it aloud for everyone to hear. I would let the shock settle in the room. Part 3, the evidence. This would be the core of the speech. I would become the accountant. I would list the numbers, the stolen funds, the luxury items they bought with my money. I'd mention the floral budget overage that paid for Chloe's diamond earrings. I'd mention the guest comfort preparations that furnished my mother's living room. I would be specific. I would be precise. Part 4, the consequences. I would announce publicly that the honeymoon they were so excited about was canceled. I had paid the travel agency directly with my credit card, and I had already called and canceled the trip, citing fraudulent activity. The cancellation policy meant I would get a full refund. I would also state my intention to pursue legal action to recoup every single stolen penny. Part 5, the toast. I would end with a toast, not to the happy couple, but to truth, to self-respect, and to consequences. As I finished typing, I read it over. It was perfect. It was cold, it was brutal, and it was nothing less than they deserved. While I was formulating my speech, I was also multitasking. I made 2 crucial phone calls. The first was to the credit card company. I reported the card as stolen and flagged the dozens of fraudulent charges we had identified. I specifically mentioned the $15,000 charge to the travel agency. The agent was incredibly helpful and immediately froze the account and started a fraud investigation. The charge for the honeymoon was reversed almost instantly. The second call was to the wedding planner. I had her personal cell number. "Hi, Angela," I said, my voice perfectly pleasant. "It's Deborah. Quick question, has the final bar tab been settled yet?" She confirmed that the open bar was running on my credit card, the one I had just canceled. "Great," I said. "I've just had to cancel that card due to some fraudulent activity. You'll need to arrange for a new form of payment from Chloe or Liam for the remainder of the evening." There was a stunned silence on the other end of the line. Before she could ask any questions, I said, "Thank you for all your hard work," and hung up. The clock was ticking. The DJ would soon announce the speeches. I took one last deep breath of the rose, scented air, stood up from the bench, and smoothed down my hideous pink dress. It was time, show time. I walked back toward the ballroom, my phone in my hand, my speech ready. My heart wasn't pounding with fear anymore. It was beating with a steady, resolute rhythm, the rhythm of justice. I re-entered the ballroom just as the clinking of a glass against a microphone echoed through the room. The best man was finishing up a rambling, slightly drunken speech. My family at the head table was laughing, Chloe looking like a princess in her throne, Liam's arm draped possessively around her. My mother caught my eye and gave me a tight, questioning smile, silently asking where I'd been. I gave her a serene smile back, a smile that didn't reach my eyes, and made my way to the front of the room. The DJ, a man with a cheesy grin, announced, "And now, let's hear from our lovely maid of honor, the bride's sister, Deborah." A smattering of polite applause followed me as I walked to the podium. I could feel Chloe's impatient glare. I probably looked a mess after my time in the garden, but I didn't care. I placed my phone on the lectern and looked out at the sea of faces. 200 people, all here to celebrate a union that was, in reality, a business transaction built on lies. "Good evening, everyone." I began, my voice clear and steady. "For those of you who don't know me, I'm Deborah, Chloe's older sister, the responsible one." A few people chuckled. My mother and Chloe exchanged a knowing smirk. I've been asked to say a few words about my sister and her new husband, Liam, and I do have so much to say. I paused, letting the silence hang in the air for a beat too long. When you're the maid of honor, you're given a lot of responsibilities, but you also get a place of honor at the wedding. A seat at the head table, a special title, or if you're really lucky, I said, reaching into my clutch purse, you get a very, very special name tag. I held up the card, turning it so the calligraphy faced the room. I'd like to share what mine says. I brought it close to the microphone and read the words slowly and deliberately. It says, "The old lady who's paying for everything." A collective gasp went through the room. The polite smiles on the guests' faces vanished, replaced by confusion and shock. I looked directly at the head table. Chloe's face had gone from smug to sheet white. Liam looked like he'd been slapped. My mother's jaw was on the floor. "I'm 28. I continued, my voice ringing with a newfound power. "But I suppose my family is right. I have been shouldering the financial burdens of an old lady for quite some time, and I did pay for everything. Every flower, every piece of catering, this beautiful ballroom. I was happy to do it because I love my sister. but I mistakenly believed that my contribution was a gift, not an opportunity for a business venture. I glanced down at my phone. Let's talk about the wedding budget. A budget of over $100,000, all from my personal savings. A budget that was apparently quite flexible. For example, there was a fascinating line item for floral budget overage. I was so confused about how flowers could cost an extra $5,000, but then I saw the beautiful new diamond earrings my sister is wearing. Mystery solved. Chloe's hand flew to her earlobe. Guests started murmuring, turning to look at her, and then there were the guest comfort preparations. I went on, my gaze shifting to my mother, whose face was now a mottled red. A very thoughtful expense of $7,000. I'm sure the guests would all be thrilled to know that this money actually went to new living room furniture for my mother's house. I do hope you're all very comfortable. The murmuring grew louder. I saw the wedding planner near the back of the room, her face pale, speaking urgently into her phone. But the real creativity came in the form of travel expenses. I had promised my sister a gift for her honeymoon, but they just couldn't wait. They decided to book their dream 3-week first-class trip to Asia and hide the $15,000 charge, hoping their old lady sister wouldn't notice. I looked at Liam, whose fake charm had completely evaporated, leaving behind a pathetic, cornered look. Unfortunately for you, I did notice, and the credit card company was very interested to hear about it. So I'm afraid your honeymoon has been cancelled, effective immediately. Chloe let out a strangled sob. The room was in chaos. People were whispering, staring, pointing. They say a wedding is a day for toasts. I said, raising an imaginary glass, so I'd like to propose a toast. I looked directly at Chloe, Liam, and my mother. The three people who had been my entire world, who had used and humiliated me without a second thought. Here's to the truth, here's to consequences, and here's to self-respect. You see, the thing about an old lady is that she learns from her mistakes, and my mistake was thinking you were family. This is a debt that will be repaid. With that, I looked over at the DJ. Oh, and a heads up to the happy couple. The open bar is about to close as it was on my now cancelled credit card. You might want to get your drinks now. I tapped the microphone one last time, the sound booming through the silent room. I picked up my phone, turned, and walked away from the podium. I didn't run. I walked calmly and deliberately through the stunned crowd, past the gaping faces of guests, and out the grand doors of the ballroom, leaving the ruins of their perfect paid for day collapsing behind me. The moment I stepped out of the ballroom and into the cool night air, it was like coming up for air after being held underwater. The adrenaline was still pumping through my veins, but I felt an overwhelming sense of calm. I didn't look back. I walked straight to the valet station, where the young man looked at me with wide, shocked eyes. He had clearly heard the commotion. I handed him his ticket, and when my car arrived, I gave him a $100 tip. Sounds like you had a rough night, he said quietly. I just smiled. No, it was the best night of my life. As I drove away from the ridiculously opulent estate, my phone began to explode. First came a text from Chloe. You ruined my life, you evil witch. Then one from my mother. How could you do this to us after everything we've done for you? The irony was so staggering it was almost funny. I pulled over to the side of the road, not out of distress, but to perform a final cleansing ritual. I opened my contacts. I found Chloe's name, block. I found my mother's name, block. I found Liam's name, block. I went to my social media and did the same, methodically erasing their presence from my digital life. It felt like closing a door on a dark, cluttered room and locking it for good. The next morning, I met Ben for breakfast. He looked at me over his coffee cup, a slow grin spreading across his face. So, he said, I heard you gave one hell of a speech. News had traveled fast. You could say that. I replied, feeling a genuine smile for the first time in over a year. He told me he had already consulted with a lawyer who specialized in financial fraud. The case was, in her words, a slam dunk. The paper trail was perfect. The screenshots, the cancelled card, the public admission. It was an open and shut case. We spent the next week compiling every document, every fake invoice, every text message where I had questioned an expense and been waved off with a lie. My lawyer drafted a letter and sent it to my mother, Chloe, and Liam. It was a simple demand: repay the stolen $57,800 within 30 days, or a civil suit would be filed, and the evidence would be turned over to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. The fallout was spectacular. I heard through the grapevine that the wedding had ended in disaster. The bar was shut down, vendors were demanding payment from a penniless bride and groom, and half the guests had left after my speech. Liam's parents, who were not wealthy at all but had been putting on airs, were mortified. They apparently told Liam to fix his mess, and wanted nothing more to do with Chloe. Chloe and Liam's relationship, built on a foundation of my money and their mutual greed, crumbled within days. He blamed her for being so obvious with the theft. She blamed him for his expensive taste. Last I heard, their marriage was on the fast track to an annulment. My mother was a pariah in her social circle. She tried to spin a story about me being mentally unstable and jealous, but my public speech, witnessed by 200 people, made that lie impossible to sell. She was the mother who raised a thief and mooched off her other daughter. They were humiliated, exposed, and most importantly broke. Faced with the threat of actual jail time, they crumbled. My mother had to take out a second mortgage on her house, the one with the brand new living room furniture, to pay back her share. Chloe and Liam had to sell the car I'd bought her and every other luxury item they owned. 30 days after receiving the demand letter, a cashier's check for the full amount was messengered to my lawyer's office. I never spoke to them again. There were no tearful apologies, no attempts at reconciliation. They had shown me who they were, and I believed them. It's been 6 months now. The money is back in my investment account, earning interest for my future, not theirs. I finally took a real vacation, a trip to Italy where I ate pasta, drank wine, and didn't check my bank account once. I started my master's program. My life is quiet now and peaceful. Sometimes I feel a pang of sadness for the family I thought I had, for the sister I once loved. But then I remember that piece of cardstock, the casual cruelty of it, and the sadness is replaced by a profound sense of peace. They didn't just label me the old lady who's paying for everything. They gave me my freedom. They showed me my own strength. I closed their account, and in doing so, I finally opened my own.